Okay, we're going to be installing the Cold Air Inductions intake for the 2010 Camaro. This is the stock intake as we see it now. The first step we're going to do is we're going to remove this hose right here. All we're going to do is give it a nice tug. Next thing we're going to do is remove this hose, or this tube, from the throttle body. Okay, so I just loosened this hose here. As you can see, it's a little loose from the throttle body. The next thing we have to do is we got to remove these two bolts here, and you just use a 10mm socket. That's the first one. There's a second one, so we're going to go ahead and take care of that right now. Okay, so we just removed these two bolts here, as you can see, and before we go ahead and take out the whole air intake assembly, we're going to go ahead and unclip the sensor for the air, and now we're just going to remove the whole intake assembly. And this just rolls right out. Like that. Okay, because we have to remove the stock air sensor from the original assembly. With that, we're going to use a torque screw here, and we'll remove it. We're just finishing taking out the second screw here. Once we do, we can safely remove the air sensor. And this is a very important step, you guys. If you can see that, there's an arrow. This is the direction that the airflow has to go to. So when we put this into the intake tube, we got to make sure that this is pointing towards the throttle body. Here we have the Cold Air Inductions intake tube. As you can see here, they supplied some screws here for us, so we don't need the original screws from the old assembly. So now we got to point, like I said, we got to install the mass air sensor with the arrow pointing towards the throttle body, as it's going to be installed this way. So here we see the new screws right here, and we're just going to go ahead and tighten that. Make sure you guys don't over tighten it, as you could strip the innards of it. And like I said, here's that arrow again pointing towards the throttle body section of the intake. We've installed the heat shield here. Now this took a little bit of time, so what you want to do is you just want to make sure that nothing's in the way and just push it down nicely. You'll see these wires here going around, but there's enough space for it so that it can fit nicely. And here's where we're going to use one of the stock nuts that we removed earlier and just tighten this. We have the heat shield installed. What we're going to do is we're going to put this filter in. What you want to do, don't make the same mistake I did. Take this wire out first. Then this is going to just squeeze into the opening of the heat shield, sorry. So make sure it's nice and tight there. And we're going to put this wire over the opening over here. And we'll just leave that ready and prepped so we can go ahead and install the intake tube that's going to go right in here. As you can see, I just installed the tube, putting it through the air filter and aligning it with the throttle body. Next things we got to do is we just got to tighten these and make sure not to over tighten them because they could strip inside here. And we're going to, three things that we have to tighten. After we've already installed this tube and tightened all the screws here and there, next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the rubber hose that was supplied and just put it into this PCV, whatever it's called, hose that's coming out from the engine. We're just going to slide that in, make sure it's nice and tugged. And then we're going to put the other end to this nipple of the intake tube. But before I do that, I just want to explain, I'm not going to show the next step in case I mess it up. Before you insert this here, you want to make sure you take the shrink tubing that was supplied. You want to just slide it over here. The step that I'm not going to show is I'm going to shrink this with a lighter because I couldn't get the heat gun from work. So once this is complete, then you can just secure that in there. Okay guys, so using my trusty lighter here, I was able to melt this, and although you have to excuse the low quality of the video, but it did fit snugly, and this should not pull off. It's still a little hot, but that should stay snugly there. The other part, you just, like I said, slide this into the nipple there, into the intake tube. Final two steps that we need to take now is we need to reconnect the air sensor. Just go ahead and slide that there until it clips. Final step we need to take is we're going to put the lid over here. Those are quarter turn fasteners, so it's not going to take too much force to fasten it. So as you can see, I finally have the lid on. Took a little bit of struggle just because this rubber wasn't allowing it to sit properly. But once you have it in, like I said, these just turn a quarter turn. Shouldn't have to over tighten it. Last thing we want to check is we want to check all our connections. This we shouldn't have to worry about. It's already connected there. These are pretty tight. They're not too tight. Again, we don't want to tighten it too much because it'll strip the grooves inside. This we just want to make sure nice and snug there. Again, with the throttle body connection, that's good. These things are pretty much melted now together, so we shouldn't have a problem there. This should stay there completely, and that completes the install.